want to really hurry through any of this. We want to have a clear understanding. But I understand that option one is really what we prefer, but we need to have the other in up here because it's going to change at 4 o'clock. Here.
Okay. Okay, go ahead and start. So I'm going to move into option 2, and that option is Citrus Virtual. So we discussed it a little bit this morning, and right now we are moving forward with plans. We're really building the plane as we are flying it into a hurricane. Just saying, right? You said storm, I'm saying it's a hurricane, because there are so many things to think about. So, of course, we have communicated with our parents the difference between what the brick and mortar traditional campus learning will be and what the Citrus Virtual will be. So we have a graphic organizer that is out there via social media. We also today approved a new supervisor position, Ms. Deb Dumas, thank goodness. We're so excited for her, and she will be now leading us in that charge as we continue making decisions. We will utilize the FLVS curriculum. We are in the process of surveying our Citrus County teachers for interest, so that is our next step. We actually have the survey ready to go. We just need to get it into SurveyMonkey and push it out, because now that we have students enrolling, we want to see which teachers may be interested. So that'll be the next step as we work through that process. Are there any questions that I can try to answer on this topic?
Are we going to allow teachers to do both virtual and brick and mortar, or are they going to have to choose one or the other?
Possibly. We don't know the answer to that yet because we need to see what our enrollment's going to look like.
Yeah. That's
Ultimately, we want it to be one or the other if we had enough enrolled, but we
Yeah.
don't know yet.
I know. We don't.
Yeah,
I
no,
can't believe we're doing all this planning without numbers, but it's okay. 28 years we all were in school and we said, well, we don't know until we get the numbers. We can't answer that until we get the numbers. We've planned an entire school district with no numbers. Phenomenal.
we're gonna go on.
Okay, and option 3, remember, were those hybrid or blended models. And we did explore 4 different models, and this correlates with the chart that looks like this one on the screen here, where it has the 4 columns of those different blended or hybrid models. We know there's possibly more than these 4. However, these were just 4 that our committee did bring to the table as just ideas, whether they thought of them themselves or they heard of other counties also looking into them. And we did a pro and a con list, just to kind of give us an idea if these are something feasible that we could look at. Because honestly, we don't want to take up time developing all these processes and protocols for something that isn't even feasible to begin with for this year possibly, or for the first day of school. So that first column there is that A day, B day, talking about full days where students would either be on campus on some of those days, and then they would be distance learning the other days. I did specify up there that when we're talking about distance learning in these scenarios, it isn't the kind of distance learning that where necessarily like if we were to be in an emergency situation. This is more the distance learning that would be synchronized definitely with the on-campus. So, when I say synchronized, it's happening at the same time. So the student would be logged on at home during period 1 into that class, and then during period 2 into that class. So it would be synchronized with the on-campus schedule. So as you can see, we have the pros up there. All 4 of these definitely helped with social distancing. I'm sorry, the other ones were, the full days were A day and B day. The second one was an idea, again, to help with social distancing, having our elementary students on campus full-time, and they would be dispersed all throughout all campuses, while all of our secondary students, 6th grade through 12, would be distance learning at home all year long. So that would be, or all 100% of the day. So this was just a way to, target our elementary school students, saying that they would probably be most likely a priority when talking about who should be on campus versus off, and then, being able to disperse them out space-wise. But as you can see, there were quite a few cons with that idea as well.
Furniture.
Furniture, correct. Our little kindergartners in a high school, what that would look like.
I mean, it's one other districts that had the same thing, and that's the first question of,
And that's
okay,
on
how
here.
are they gonna?
And that's on here as a con, absolutely. But it would help with, smaller student-teacher ratio, those kinds of things. So we did, want to specify what are the positives with it. We wanted to be open-minded with these ideas and really explore the potential of any of them. The next one is a split session where it's half days. So again, you would have the students on campus, some of them distance learning, but this model, the split sessions one, every student would be there at some time that day. So I might be just an AM session person, so every day I'm there in the morning, and then every day in the afternoon I'm home, okay, and vice versa. I might be there every day, or it might even be alternating days, but you are at school on campus for half a day, and then at home for half a day. So that's the half-day session model there, and you can just probably assume that transportation would be a huge issue with that. Talking about the bringing them back and forth, the picking up, then drop off, and pick up again and drop off, how that would look, if that's even possible.
I know you've covered every rock and stone with all the questions on 26 pages. Did we touch base with any of the daycares that would be, pick up and drop off if we did a split day?
No, we kind of stopped when we looked at what our drop off and pickup would look like just in our school buses.
Yeah.
But did we reach out to daycares yet? No.
Because one thing that's always in the back of our mind is most of our, 70% of our kids they have working parents or single parents, and I mean, those daycares are real important to
Oh, absolutely.
getting a child up with.
I think that was one of the lines of consideration, though, is parent.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Just parents, yes, and you'll notice that the first three, that is a red con. Parents would need to juggle with work schedules.
Yeah.
And we'd have to also then think older students would possibly now carry the burden of monitoring their younger siblings instead of actually being able to really do distance learning at that time. That was definitely something we talked about as a con. Yeah.
And that would, if the daycares knew they had to drop off and pick up a half a day, that would.
Are they even able to do that?
have a
Right.
big impact on.
Right. And the financial burden on parents to now have to do more daycare would be another piece too. That's on there as well. That last column was one that we got. We know that other counties we explored. I believe Pasco County is one of them that is going to be offering this as an option where students choose distance learning or on-campus learning. So this one would be where students can actually choose right now that, right now we have our two options of Citrus Virtual or traditional on-campus. Their third option is students choose right now to either do on-campus or the distance learning, meaning they are sitting at home every day with a synchronized schedule as their on-campus education is, but they are logging in to the different periods and doing their curriculum from the school via, say, Canvas. Now, I will say, though, that them being able to do that it's two major factors that they have that we don't. One, they have included Canvas in their instruction for the past few years, so them being ready to hit the ground running on day one with their teachers already familiar and their students familiar with that learning program is a huge hurdle that we would be facing. Also, they have an established their version of a Citrus Virtual as well. So those have, already having those kinds of things established where this is our first year of doing that, kind of put them in a place, I believe, where that is a more doable and feasible option. But it isn't something that I think should just write off in the future as something that we, could offer here, being that, we will have something in place, our distance learning in place, once we are comfortable and trained and using that Canvas platform with our students and teachers. But you'll see there are some other, cons with it than just that. When you talk about decrease in food and nutrition services funds, that is a piece there. And of course, that would be based on enrollment, because students, remember, cannot receive our food services unless they are on campus during that time. So if they are at home doing distance learning or at home doing Citrus Virtual, they cannot benefit from our food and services program, and we, of course, do not receive those funds for it as well. Transportation concerns, cost and length of time, and you can see reduced transportation funds in there.
And I think you know this as well. The trouble is all of these, which are worst case scenario considerations, they're during the spring a lot of this was also had to get modified. Attendance had to get modified. Feeding of kids, the U.S. Department of Agriculture did make a modification that allowed so that students did not have to come every day in order to get funded and fed. I don't think we're here now, as we know, but if we had to get to that point, there's going to be considerations, I think, that has to be made. But I just wanted to really talk about this one thing. I really want to mention synchronized learning. It's going to be a new buzz term that is heard and talked about a lot. I think it sounds great when you just say it on paper and you say, oh, we're doing this. But the reality of doing that, and I'm going to be interested to see how Pasco does this, because even with all of Pasco's, and by the way, they also have additional funding models that we do not have. Synchronized learning is a huge undertaking, and while it has its place, and if you said to me, oh, we'd like to pilot one class in the entire, I'd say that might be worth exploring. But to consider it as a full-time option across K through 12 learning is and by the way, when we have to get it done in 6 weeks, I am so glad that staff just said, that's just not realistic for us to take. But like you said, is it something to consider as a single solution opportunity in the future? Perhaps. But it's just not a realistic one, I think, for a district to take on. And unfortunately, and I'm in a lot of meetings where synchronized learning is being talked about. Oh, are you guys considering that? And I'm thinking, well, who can realistically do that? So we can put it on paper, but that's nothing compared to what you'd say. Every classroom, a kid could be live at home or live in it's just not realistic. So I'm saying that because I know sometimes I'm looked at as the tech person on the board at times, and I'm just saying to you, please know I would not want us to take that on at this time. And I would not, so I'm glad you guys came to that conclusion without.
Well, I've got a question too on that, because when we looked at those A day, B day, I mean, basically we're talking about a Monday, Wednesday, we're reduced capacity, right, for our schools. And that could very well be a requirement. I mean, even now, you look at the guidelines now, 6 foot, they want 6 foot between people with social distancing. And if this pushes, if we don't get into phase 3, we continue with this, I think reduced capacity is going to be something that we're going to have to deal with. If we did a Monday, Wednesday, a Tuesday, Thursday, and then a Friday, I think that's what we had talked about, or
Yes.
when we had discussed these things. But is there a way to do that without having the synchronized, the same time that you would be in that class? So it doesn't have to be synchronized on campus.
No, it does not. When we were discussing this model, that was what, that's how we were talking about it, though. Does it have to be? No. It does not have to be asynchronous.
Some districts are doing, like, their A day is in person, and then the A day on the next day is at home doing distance learning while the B kids are in there. And then the next day, the A kids come back. But it's not synchronized learning like you're saying, but it's
Our
still.
model here is.
But
Yeah,
but
what
that
I'm
is a
saying is
consideration.
We could consider an A-B, a Monday, Wednesday group, a Tuesday, Thursday group, and then they're all off on Friday. We could do that without synchronized learning.
We could. That is a possibility, yes. However, then looking at what cons, what would we be facing with that? Because now you'd be having a teacher having to do both planning for both of those models. Teaching those students via Canvas versus these students I am doing right here face to face, not at the same time. Is that what you're saying? Like they would be doing,
Right.
And then hours wise, what kind of hours are you going to be having that teacher do if those students are choosing to do their distance learning, say not during the time of that class, they're doing it, say at home after hours in the evening? I guess that was like more of the question. Because the teacher's with other students then throughout the day, not being able to help that kid that is at home, wanting to do it at a different time.
What you're saying is a real, but I think and Mr. Dodd, I apologize, correct me if I'm wrong, but is I think is you're having half of your students physically in front of you on one day, and half of your students physically in front of you the other day. The day that you don't have them physically in front of you, you've planned for them to do work at home, is I think how the model I've seen it, so that they recognize
That's right.
the first day they're doing face-to-face, they may be lecturing, they may be doing that. The second day they're doing assignments
That they were given probably.
that they were given on the first.
Yeah, that-
It, I
that's
mean,
fine.
it is a common consideration. It doesn't mean that it's not, it has a lot of challenges with it.
Right.
So it's, I mean, it doesn't it still has all of the reds that you guys are bringing up. So it
Right.
doesn't
And
change
those,
that.
those plans work on paper.
Right.
The reality is Johnny doesn't come to school Monday because he had a cough, so he doesn't show up Monday, he wants to come Tuesday. So now Tuesday, you ended up with more kids than you anticipated coming, because you had them broke up, but that's not, Tuesday's not his day.
Johnny's
Or he
not
doesn't
today.
come Monday and then he misses Tuesday and then he's back to school on Wednesday. So it's not, I understand what you're saying,
Yeah.
but I want you to understand that works out great on paper. But the reality is who shows up and who doesn't show up and how often do they show up and not show up.
It's more feasible, I mean, it's a
It is
consideration
a
at a
separate-
high
it
school,
is a
but it
separate
becomes
planning
almost
requirement for
impossible
teachers.
in
Right.
middle and
So
elementary.
then if we do a strict synchronized learning, okay, with an A day and a B day. So take me through that. I mean, the teacher's gonna have, let's say on the A day, it's gonna have half the kids in the classroom.
On a computer screen.
And then she's gonna be zooming, or he or she is gonna be zooming with the other.
The other half on a,
And is there gonna be student engagement over here and student engagement over here?
yes,
Okay, so that's pretty difficult too, right? I mean,
correct.
'cause-
Oh, they're both difficult, absolutely. Correct, because you'd be having these students raising hands,
So,
asking questions,
right.
answering questions, yep.
So at least the switch to where you're teaching this group this day is this is your class. And then, so what I'm saying is that would be more of a benefit. I know what Mike's saying is that, yeah, on paper it looks good, but even this, and then I'm thinking, what if the kid doesn't get up for 8 o'clock class and now misses his synchronized learning
That's the
session?
problem.
Correct.
How does that look? So, yeah.
Then he comes back to school, he coughs on somebody. That'll happen.
Well, that's part of the downside of synchronized learning is that they are still, in theory, supposed to be in class during that period of time. Well, now if their internet goes down, if they decide they're gonna wake up late, now they've missed the class. How do we deal with attendance? How do we deal with, is it, because
There's no flexibility.
because virtual is very different in how
Right.
attendance
Yeah.
is done, as Ms. Dumas would tell us, and
Right.
it's not the same as, as synchronized learning. You are, in theory, supposed to be in class.
Right, so I mean, the idea is if the child slept in, whether they're gonna be
They're-
on or not,
they're-
you would have marked them absent if they slept in and didn't come to on campus either. Jim's
Right.
saying they didn't make the bus,
Right.
you'd be marking them tardy
Thomas,
in.
did you ever watch any synchronized swimming?
Yes, I did,
Just
and
a question.
it's odd.
Apply that to that. You can't not be
It
there.
looks good on paper when you're doing it, but it really doesn't work in any practice, and that's why I will be curious to see how Pasco really accomplishes that.
I mean, I do agree that that would be another column that I think we should explore, of the, not being synchronized, what would that look like an A to B day, not being synchronized, because there is something to say about that. The only apprehension I could see having is that an elementary especially, on a daily basis, that would be like saying that means half of your year is not face-to-face instruction. And I think as an elementary school teacher, that's not true. Jim's saying like every day you are doing some face-to-face, lessons and instruction. And you don't ever have days where the student is purely just working on their own all day long, even if you gave them assignments. You know what I'm saying? So it's almost like half of your year. How would I be now teaching them? You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Is it doable? Probably. I can't. I would have to really look and see how that would look, and is it in the best interest of the student?
But the professional
Yeah.
development of planning that, the lesson planning, it's its own animal, so different than anything remotely of what we're doing.
It's worth exploring.
And yeah, I think what I would like to see when I envision this, because man, there's all kinds of options here, and the team that you have is great to go through this. But what my question for you would be, if we're required to have reduced capacity, what plan does your group recommend?
Well, if it is such a reduced capacity that it is not feasible, if it's a 6-foot rule that you must abide by, there's no way our buses can abide by that. You know what I'm saying, with the way, so we would probably have to go to distance learning 100%.
100%.
You know what I'm saying? Honestly, that's where we are at with that, because due to transportation being the number one, if we can't get them there, we can't teach them. You know, or they'd be staggering their bus routes. We'd be getting kids arriving at, 2 o'clock and some going home at 9. You know what I'm saying? Because it would be such, trying to get the kids there would be such an issue.
I think one of the, and I was glad because I think your original draft had
Oh, moving in high school, right. We would have to stagger instruction, and students actually on campus would be the other issue, correct, of them moving around, switching classes.
I think
Teachers not being able to go to their classes because they're on different schedules.
when the governor or the Department of Education came out with their plan a week or so ago now, I can't remember. It's the week. It feels like a month. It basically did away with phase 1, 2, and 3, because it basically just said, yes, you are to physical distance, which is, by the way, a word that's been creeping into this, is the modified social distancing as best you can. It basically said, oh yes, you should social distance if you can, and we know you can't, so then you do the best you can, which basically has told us, in opening the schools, they're not making it a hard 6 foot. And I think, at least talking with other districts, I think everyone is under that same impression that it is do
Everything
the
is
best
if
you can.
feasible.
Yeah, everything is, it's got a caveat, if feasible, it classifies it. Now, and I don't see where it helps us, but it does then go into saying, use your cafeterias, use your libraries as additional classroom space, and all of those areas. It really doesn't help us because it creates almost as many new challenges to look at that. It's not to say we wouldn't consider it in certain school locations, but pervasively, it probably brings up as many challenges as it does solutions. Unless I'm wrong, it's really more of a question.
Yeah, and it's up to the local officials, and one suggestion is opening the school windows. So, I'm just.
Wait, we can't open the windows. Yeah.
So yes, all these are, if we have more restrictions, they're viable options to explore. We have to remember too the food and transportation piece too, because if we do have an AB day, our students aren't going to eat half the week for breakfast and lunch.
And I tend to agree with Mr. Kennedy a little bit there, that I think there will be some considerations given by the USDA. The transportation, though, is my question about transportation. I know some public transportation bus lines now require anyone getting on board to wear a mask, and so I kind of, in my mind, I kind of think, well, what if we were able to get kids to school on buses, but we would require them to wear a mask on the bus? What if we were allowed to do that, but then when we got them to the school, then we would have a reduced capacity issue to deal with? Could we make that work, where they could be in school without a mask on, but at a reduced capacity with a distancing component? So that was, that's what I'm thinking. I mean, right now, you're pretty much saying it's all or nothing because of the transportation. You say the food and transportation. I say remove the food from the issue because I think we're going to address that issue. But the transportation, so I guess my question then is, well, if we can solve the transportation issue, can we do it at school? What would be the recommendation for having a reduced capacity at school?
If we're gonna solve the issue by making kids wear a mask on the bus, why not solve it and have them wear a mask in class then?
Well, that's the question, and I've wrestled with that too, because how can you expect a smaller child to wear a mask all the time at school? And even the discussion over what kind of mask and how.
I don't
much they
disagree, but
protect.
that same child's gonna be on the bus in some cases for
Yeah.
an hour with nobody supervising because we want the driver is paying attention to the road, so. I don't know, I'm just putting that out, it's difficult, and then we have to say, what are we gonna do if they don't wear a mask? could, you know.
Right.
Unfortunately, we have a society where there's a lot of, people like to do their own things sometimes, and what if a kid doesn't? We have, as Mr. Kennedy said earlier, I've had as many calls from parents that say, if you're wearing a mask, I'm not coming back, as I have that said, if you're not wearing a mask, I'm not coming back. It's split. So there's a lot of people that you could go out to Publix, and half the people are wearing masks and half are not. So that's a battle we'll fight, with some parents saying, I'm not putting a mask on my student. So, I mean, they're tough decisions, we're just gonna have to make one and live with.
And Mr. Dodd, I think that you're on the right track. The state has certainly basically told us when it comes to transportation, we're not gonna be able to meet the CDC guidelines. So consider masks. They don't give us anything more than to say, then think about using masks.
And that would be.
Which is the direction that I think school districts are under, is to say, okay, then we do that. I do wonder, and it goes back to our communication plan, do we just try to help parents to understand we are going to be encouraging the use of masks, especially in those small environments like buses. If that's something you don't want to consider, then transport your child yourself if you're able to. Or look at, having carpooling. Now, Miss Kaler and I have lived through many a modified parent pickup route that we've had to do, and a lot of you all have too. We're going to have increased, parent pickup as a result of this, which may help our numbers on our buses, but I'm not sure we shouldn't encourage, really encourage it. The next piece of that is when we have after-school activities, athletics, and they're on those buses, do we change our expectation that, okay, how you get there has always been you go on the school bus. But if now I'm a parent and I don't want my kid to have a mask, well, the only way they're going to be able to participate in that activity is if either they don't wear a mask and they're vulnerable to that, or they have to wear a mask. Do we provide an option or consideration of them self-driving? Not necessarily the student driving, but the parent driving. I would be open to that unless legal tells us differently, and they may. And it's not today. About parents driving their children to athletic events, which typically the intent is that they go on the bus. But those are, if you have any thoughts.
Oh, I do have some thoughts.
See?
And I'm gonna have to obviously take a look at this, but I don't know if you can force the kids to wear masks to get on the bus.
I don't think.
Oh, I don't think so. But if the parent says, I don't want them on a bus where people don't have masks, and they want them involved in and then they say, fine, I drive my kid every day, now I'm in an after-school activity, the only way for them to get to that football game or that basketball game.
They don't play,
Okay.
because that's not, that's.
But we're saying to them then, either you get on a bus and not wear a mask and your choice, or you have to get on the bus with it. We're not going to allow you to self-drive your child to an event.
But right now, they have to get on the bus to go there, the parent can drive them home.
Right. So why wouldn't what would be the downside of letting them get them there?
There was a period of time too when we had limited.
Probably not.
I don't either, and that's
We're
why I
talking
guess,
two different things. I was talking
no, I'm sorry.
educational purposes.
No, I'm saying after-school activity. If we're trying to limit number of people on it, I'd be driving my kid.
Right. I'll talk with the superintendent about that, but I don't see it from a legal.
I guess my thought is if they're participating, I know some of the smaller, like country club sports would be different, but if you're football, for example, you want everyone to get there at the same time. And if you're comfortable enough to participate in a sport like football where you're gonna have a packed bus, you already have so much contact in play that I don't know.
I would question that with swimming. I would have a very different view of that. You're in a chlorine environment, social
Right,
distance.
that's why I said some sports would be different, but
Yeah.
they're also probably not a packed bus. Most of our small, like, I mean, maybe swimming is, but I think some of those you can provide the spacing that would be necessary, but for some of the bigger, I just can't imagine a team of 60 kids, all their parents or multiple parents bringing them and having them arrive in time to do their required.
But if a
administrative
parent
things.
wants to, I'm struggling with how we mandate that they have to, in this environment. In an ordinary environment, I would concur, but in this environment where we're trying to provide flexibility, I don't know how we don't consider that as an option. I guess, to me, again, 60 people on a bus right now with a bunch of high schoolers is a challenge, to me, would be a very challenging situation with regards to true social distancing. High school's gonna be a challenge enough with couples.
Right.
in
And
social
I guess I'm
distancing.
just thinking those same 60 kids are gonna be interacting, touching, hitting each other, like, they're going to have contact, so I just, for some of them, I just guess that's just a question of like.
And that may also be a
time,
thing if they make them wear masks, that would be coach's problem.
Yeah, I think these are gonna be questions, though, I believe as board members, we're gonna be asked these. We are gonna really be asked these questions. And I understand what you're saying about the physical contact. I think that that's still why there's a big question mark about certain activities. It's a lot easier for me to argue about how I'm gonna accommodate and modify swimming than it is basketball, soccer, and football. And we don't have answers, I think, for a lot of these right yet.
And I have a problem with us mandating masks on the bus or in the classrooms if the CDC and governor says do whatever's feasible to open up your schools. I just don't think we should go anywhere beyond that. It's what's best for our kids. And we've traveled, remember, I can't remember what year it was in swimming, maybe, but we had a distance problem and bus problem, and we were allowed to caravan. Our parents came to school, picked up all of our swimmers, and if we were swimming over the Spring Pines, we caravanned, and we had parents driving kids. We had notes that said, my kid can ride with so-and-so. But we've transported kids in cars every year. I started swimming in 1993 here, and we've
it's
been
fraught-
kids in cars all.
It's fraught with problems, and a lot of that may be coach's decision, fine, something, if you want a caravan, that's fine, but if you stop at the chicken store to get a Coke and you show up late out of the caravan, then you're not
Absolutely.
playing tonight.
Absolutely.
You can put some of the, the pressure on the parents to do that.
Right, but there are coaches that do require the kids to ride on the bus, that is true.
Well,
Right,
that's-
to the event.
No, that's true, that's true. It may be a change this year on how we handle that, though.
I have to think, like, legally wise, if you have to sign them out, so I mean, are they still on, say, swim time or whatever? Do they have to sign them out and then sign them back in once they get to the location? Because now they're back under the control of the coach
No,
or supervision.
they wouldn't be under the control until they get there.
It's, right, that's what I'm saying, they sign up, but then if they leave, say, at 1 o'clock, because they gotta leave early to get to where they're going, to the game, they have to sign out to the parent just drives them, and they sign back in when they're under the direction or supervision. I'm just saying you would have those pieces to it, I believe.
And I think those are, but I think we're getting these calls now. We're getting these calls right now from parents and from coaches and from teachers that are saying these
And
very
from the Chronicle.
things. And yeah,
Sorry.
so,
And I think going back to our school issue, Thomas, that, if we're talking about less kids on a bus, if we're only transporting half our kids on one day, and we can solve some of those problems just on sheer numbers. If only half of them are going, so, we'd have to look at those numbers, and then maybe if we put out the plea to parents and say, hey, if you could drive your kid to school, it will help us to have school, so that we can transport the kids that don't have transportation. I mean, we might get a buy-in there too from the community.
The other problem that you're gonna have, though, if you do the half, some on Monday, some on Tuesday, is the coaches that are gonna practice every day, there's gonna be kids that won't be able to go to practice because their parents aren't gonna be able to take them to practice.
no, I agree with that. I think what Mr. Dodd is saying though is on just even our scenario A, our regular opening scenario, if we make a plea to parents about transporting their child every day to school and try and get some buy-in, that's gonna help us in just the day-to-day operations, because hopefully then we bring down some of our busing numbers right now.
Sure.
And
But that all sounds.
and
Just keep
that-
in mind,
that
we are
sounds
paid on our busing,
I know.
on we transport. So
And that sounds.
currently
Sorry.
with full buses, we're getting 60% of what it costs to run. So if we cut that in half, we're gonna get about 30% what it costs.
Well, I didn't think we'd ever cut it in half. I was thinking even if we just, I was thinking if we had 10 or 15% less, I can't imagine we'd ever have.
And that really sounds good for about the first 4 or 6 weeks, and
Yeah.
then I'm tired of driving him down to the high
Well,
school at
that's-
7:15 every
Well,
week.
that's a very fair,
So now he's at the bus stop also,
that's a
and
very
it throws
fair
your
argument.
numbers off.
The elephant in the room is Tallahassee, because they want us to open these schools so that people can get back to work and the economy's going. So that's what's really driving everything and all the changes that we're going through. So I don't want to do any more than what they're saying. If it's feasible to put more than 13 kids on a bus and we think they're safe, I think we should do it. I don't think we should get into the mask thing, and it should be optional, because if the state isn't requiring it and we require it, we'll get more. You want telephone calls, do that.
I don't think it, though, one of the things I think with masks, that communication piece
Yes.
is, while it's not mandatory, it's recommended.
That's
See, it's
pretty-
not saying it's optional is not the same as saying it's recommended, but not mandatory.
Let's put it on education and the health department. This is what we consider best as the schools reopen, that you do send your child to school with a mask. But I think we are opening up another can of worms if we start mandating things that we're not gonna get back with about Tallahassee or the federal government. So I'm kind of opposed to taking parent choice. If you want your kid to wear a mask, okay, but
I'm just saying, we have very different issues at the elementary than we do
Yeah.
at the secondary level.
oh yeah.
And, you know, we can, the AB day, a lot of that stuff can work out easier at the elementary level. But it doesn't matter if I put 1,500 kids at Citrus High or 700 kids at Citrus High. They're gonna find a way to be next to each other, one way or another. So instead of exposing themselves to 1,500 kids, they've exposed themselves to 699 kids. I don't know if that's a big difference at the end of the day, when we're talking about the
Because
virus.
in the afternoon, they're gonna
But
be
that's
finding
the
out.
reality of what we're dealing with. So, you know, if it gets to that point where we have to do an AB day, and I think what the team looked at when they came up with this scenario, that doesn't really help parents. That doesn't help the mom and dad that say, we gotta get back to work, because somebody's gotta watch them on Tuesday and Thursday. So that's why we're trying to come up with as many different things as we can do to accommodate that, because I think that's what the direction the governor wanted us to do, was get the schools open to help the economy back up.
Right, but the alternative though, Mike, is that then they're home all week.
Yeah, then they're home all week, that's the alternative, yeah.
No, so that's
At
tough
least-
too.
At least they work 2 days.
And please know, we are so appreciative. This has been so hard, and I know, I thought this was a great chart, because it really walked even us through being able to go, okay, so that's not gonna work for that. The challenge would be, and it makes sense what brings us back to what the recommendations are today. I do think that if we ever, and I don't think they're going to, but if they did say a hard social distancing, it becomes very challenging for us to have a day-to-day operation like that. I mean, and even in the 8AD day, it becomes very difficult to do that, because how are we gonna monitor all of those pieces? I think the approach that you all are talking about, the signages, the educating, all of those pieces, I think what we do is that communication piece is gonna be so vital, not just at the school level, but also like the masks. If what we're saying is, we believe that these are beneficial, we need to, get that information and share that information. Encourage, families to explore that. And I think the approach that you all have here is right on the money.
I can say something something about the mask, because we're not mandating masks, but you may ask yourself, well, why did you order a child mask then? Because we felt like we had to have some on hand for the clinics and those kind of things, and at this point, the supply line is hit and miss, what you get, what you don't get, so we ordered those far in advance, so we have them regardless in case
I
something
think
happens.
it's a great idea.
Yes, we need to, absolutely.
Is there any other input you would like to share as we continue working on our plan?
Well, I appreciate you guys keeping us in the loop. I know we all met with you, and I know Dr. Hebert couldn't be here today, but, you know, there's a lot of work's gone into this, and I appreciate the communication with us, you know, and giving,
Keep building that airplane.
allowing us to give input.
Keep building it.
And we'll keep open lines of communication.
It,
Hurricane season's here.
Mr. Dodge, you did bring up a point. It was very helpful for you all to meet with us so that we could kind of ask some of those crazy questions and, you know, and then go through, well, okay, so thank you for that time.
We'll continue doing that. Okay, thank you.
Any other business? So we are at the last point of the workshop, and that would be adjournment. Thank you all for coming. Sure.
Thank y'all for the input, appreciate it.
You guys got along.
Yeah, we know. One thing's for sure, we know it'll change by morning.
I don't think